that. I'm actually going to ask Zebulon in Sweden to speak to us next because I think you've got a question which picks up on some of the points that Daniel was making in his previous reply.
Well, yes, my question is about Europe and specifically regarding or what you predict will happen in 2015, both in regards to the development in Ukraine and also in regards to the state of the relations between the West and Russia.
Yes, I think it's a particularly difficult area for actually all of Europe to handle. I suppose the short answer is that I don't see a very positive development on that. I can't see that, for example, as Vladimir Putin made very clear in his speech just now, Crimea is something that Russia fully intends to hang on to, so there's no prospect of any reversal there, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of any change in eastern Ukraine as well, with Russia moving back from its involvement there. So that fact alone, I think, guarantees that there's going to be ongoing tensions. I would assume ongoing sanctions between from the West towards Russia, and perhaps most disturbingly, completely different views of the reality on the ground. On the one hand in the West, and on the other hand in Russia. Sometimes we seem to be living in different universes, and that makes agreement particularly difficult. One of the questions, I think, is whether Western Europe stays united in the face of what's happening in Ukraine and in the face of Russia towards Russia. And there, I think, views differ. I mean, there are even some differences among the contributors to our publication. One view is that Vladimir Putin will have done more than anybody else to unite Western Europe in a foreign policy sense, united in German policy perhaps here being crucial, united in a opposition to Russian policy in Ukraine. Another view is that unity will start to fray over the course of the year as some countries want to do more business with Russia, as they themselves start to feel the impact of economic impact of the sanctions. They can be hurt by their own exporters being banned from Russia or their own contracts not being fulfilled. So I think that's very much an open question, which way it will go, and that depends, I think, on whether there's a tendency towards ratcheting up the tensions or trying to make it acute. Through all this, in any case, whatever happens, there will be a need for cooperation with Russia on other matters. So Iran is a good example of this, where one of the crucial foreign policy issues next year will be the fate of the talks with Iran over its nuclear program, and that, of course, involves both West European countries and Russia.
One thing I would just add is what will be interesting to see next year is how the West responds to sanctions that seem to be working. It's all very well applying sanctions, but as and when the Russian people appear to suffer as a result, it is entirely possible that the Western politicians will start to wonder whether this is quite the right way. It's the moral decision becomes rather more tricky if Russians are suffering as a result.
Well, in addition, trickier still, because it's going to be extremely difficult to disentangle what's causing the problems for Russian citizens as between sanctions on the one hand and the fall in the oil price on the other, because the fall in the oil price is a very severe blow to the Russian economy.
Zebulon, you're up in Sweden. I believe you share it. I probably get my geography wrong. You share a border with Russia, don't you?
Can you repeat that, please?
No, I think I was about to get my geography wrong in terms of whether Sweden shares a border with Russia. So forget I asked it. What's the view from Sweden on this?
Well, I largely agree with Daniel. As you mentioned, Putin was very confrontational in his speech yesterday, and I think we should be very mindful of that. You know, in the face of falling domestic support, he could attempt to score some victory abroad and couldn't possibly try to target one of the Baltic states. maybe Georgia, as you write about in this week's issue of The Economist, or maybe even Sweden. I mean, we had, as I think you know, we had a submarine incursion in the Stockholm archipelago a few weeks ago. Right now we have a very weak and inexperienced government. In a few months we have a snap election. So I think going into 2015, we have to be very conscious of that threat and, as you mentioned, maintain our resolve and, of course, support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
Thank you, David. Really interesting. So our fifth